Well, thank you guys, and thank you for the video. So the good news is that video is the punchline to the story that I really want to tell you, which is that I end up building a billion-dollar company. I end up very far from where I began, doing things that I never would have dreamed that I'd be able to accomplish. But the most important thing to understand about me, knowing where I end up, is that I am not a born entrepreneur. There's a lot of people out there these days that are born entrepreneurs. I know there's a lot of people that before it seemed like they could walk, they were snatching flowers out of somebody's yard and selling them back to the person that owned the house, but that was not me. So I had a paper route, and the paper route was, the payment for it was bifurcated into two parts. The first part you just got automatically for delivering the papers, and the second part was you had to knock on people's doors and collect the money. And I was so afraid to go knock on the doors that I never ended up collecting the second half of the money. So even though I was supposedly on this entrepreneurial venture, I was so scared that I was making half the money that I could have made. And that was how I grew up. I grew up in a family that teetered between white collar and blue collar. One minute my dad was a purchasing manager at a paint company. The next he was a mechanic. Sort of bounced back and forth. My parents taught me to be a good employee, which meant keep my head down, do as little work as possible, and avoid punishment at all costs. And that was really where I grew up, and I thought that that made a lot of sense. And I cheated my way through high school. I also thought that made sense. And then when I was about to go to college, I almost chickened out. I had taken the SATs twice. I got a 990 combined score. A monkey smearing feces on the test can actually get a better score than that. It was absolutely heartbreaking, but it felt so reflective of who I believed myself to be. I didn't think of myself as smart. I didn't think I was well educated. I certainly didn't think I was smarter than the next person. And I remember I told my mom that I didn't want to go, and she went nuts. And she was like, "There's absolutely no way, you've got to go." And she all but kicked me out of the nest. Now the great irony is, she then spends the next 20 years trying to claw me back. So I was like, "Mom, what gives? I don't understand. You were the reason. I was willing to stay home. I was more than happy to live that small life. You were the one that made me one of only 2 people in my entire graduating class to leave the state. So why?" And she said, "I never wanted you to say, 'what if?' I never wanted you to look back on your life and wonder what could have been if you had tried." And then she said, with absolutely no malice in her heart, "But I just assumed you were going to fail." But that was the only reasonable assumption to make about me at the time. I was profoundly lazy. I felt really lost. I didn't know how to get out of life what I wanted. I had applied to one school other than the state school, and that was because someone had made a random comment that it was the best film school, which was USC Film, and I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. I had that dream. And so my mom kicks me out of the house. She doesn't tell me at the time that she thinks I'm going to fail. She's my biggest cheerleader. She's wanting me to do well. She sends me off. I go there, and I realize I've made a catastrophic mistake. And I've been accepted to USC, the school, but not USC Film School. I didn't even know you had to apply separately. That's how blindly I went into this. That was my approach to the world, right? Keep my head down, do as little work as possible, avoid punishment at all costs. I figured that college was going to be an extension of high school. So I go to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor says, "Look, I see this all the time. You're not going to get into film school. It is statistically speaking harder to get into USC Film School than it is to get into Harvard Law. So what you're doing right now is you're taking film classes like you've already been accepted, and I'm telling you, it's going to end up costing you a year of your life and extra money because you are not going to get in." Now, one thing I'm going to tell you right now, the greatest gift anyone can ever give you in life is doubt. When someone doesn't believe in you, that's the single most profound gift that they can give you. And I told them I was going to get into film school. And they said, "Look, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be a mistake," but there was nothing they could do to stop me. So I started taking classes as if I had already been accepted to film school. And I said, "All right, This is my dream. This is the thing that I want to do. And I know that I've, up to this point, been incredibly lazy in my life. But if this is what I want, if this is the thing that supposedly is my passion, this is the thing that my life is building towards, it doesn't make sense to be cheating. I'm about to take tens of thousands of dollars in student loans to pull this off. Why would I want to cheat my way through this? And so I went and found out who was on the admission committee to USC Film School. And I took him to lunch. And I said, what do I need to do to get into film school? And he said, well, you need a 1,300 on your SATs. I said, I have a 990. So what's the way around that? And he said, well, look, there's actually 2 times where we accept people into film school as you're an incoming freshman and then as an incoming junior. So he said the SAT just stands for Scholastic Aptitude Test. It's supposed to tell me how well you're going to do in college. But if you've been in college for 2 years, I'm just going to look at your grades. So Tom, I'm going to give you a secret. If you get good enough grades, I'm not even going to look at the rest of your application. So I said, all right. And for the next 2 years, I locked myself in a room. I did not date. I did not party. I didn't drink a drop of alcohol. I didn't smoke weed. I didn't play video games. Nothing. All I did was work. And I told myself, A or F, sink or swim, I'm not going to cheat, not once. And I ended up getting better grades than I'd gotten in high school. And the one thing that my mother had not accounted for when she silently, thankfully, thought that I was going to fail was my ambition. What I hadn't learned yet was drive. And I was beginning to get the first taste of what drive looked like. So I buckled down, I got the grades, I got into film school, and then everything started going right for me. It was magical. My first set of films were great. They captured the attention of the class. Because of that, in the next round of film school, I got the ideal partner that everybody was trying to get to make their big film. I made that big film, and then from that, it's called a 310. From your 310 film, 4 people in the entire class get chosen to make a senior thesis film. Now remember, I was the kid with the 990 on his SATs who was told he would never get into film school. I get into film school. Then the odds are against me that I'll make a senior thesis, and I get to make the senior thesis. And it was amazing, and I was over the moon, and I believed in my talents. I knew deep down I was born for this. I was made to make movies. It was in my DNA, the very thing that made me me. My entire sense of identity and who I was that I was a great filmmaker. And I had just been proving it. For 2 years, I had captured the imagination of my entire class, and here was my moment. I was going to make this senior thesis film. It was going to be amazing. It was going to get me a 3-picture deal in Hollywood, and my life was going to be set. And then I failed completely. And I failed completely because I was utterly devoid of talent. Now, this is true. And in that moment, I realized I had no idea how to tell stories. I had no idea how to make movies. And the reason that I'd gotten as far as I'd gotten up to that point was you were telling an artificial kind of story. Short films, silent films. It was totally different language, totally different how you put the camera. And for whatever reason, I made one simple choice on accident that paid off, that made me think I was talented. And that was, I just didn't tell stories where you expected people to be talking, which is the mistake most filmmakers make. They try to tell a normal story, but you can't hear anything, so it's super weird. And so that one sort of accidental decision convinced me that I was talented. And then, when the reality check of failing so publicly in front of my entire class, having to screen it in front of my family who'd flown down, it was heart-wrenching, and people were making fun of me, not even behind my back. They were making fun of me to my face. Film school in LA, boys and girls, certainly back then, was a brutal dog-eat-dog world. And when they smelled blood in the water, they went after me. And it was gut-wrenching. And I remember calling my mom from a payphone, laying on the ground in the middle of campus because I felt so broken. Everything about who I thought I was gone in an instant. And my mom just didn't know what to say. And so that began a period of my life where I felt utterly hopeless, completely lost. and my parents stopped helping me financially when I graduated, so there I was. I did not have my 3-picture deal. I'm laying on the floor in the middle of campus. I can't afford rent. At one point, after graduating, I was laying on my carpet because I couldn't afford furniture. And I was just laying on the floor of my apartment saying, where do I go from here? I have no idea how to break into the film industry. I'm not a talented filmmaker anyway. So what does the rest of my life look like? And it felt so hopeless, and I was flirting with depression, and I had no idea how to get out of it. And then I lucked into a teaching job. And I started teaching filmmaking. And the fascinating thing was, I knew how to help the students get better. And so this notion that I had in my head that you're either born with something or you're not. You're either a born filmmaker or you're not. You're either a born entrepreneur or you're not. Began to waver. And I began to think, wait a second, if I can help them make their films better, why can't I help myself make my own films better? And I went back into that mode that got me into film school, and I put my head down again, and I started working my ass off. And every night, to be able to go in and teach a class the next day, I worked and I studied and I tried to figure this stuff out and bring it in so I could teach them, to help them improve. And in doing that, I was reinforcing in my mind that I could change, that I could improve. And at that time, for those of you that remember this, the idea of brain plasticity was debated. People said you're born with a certain number of neurons and you just lose them over your life. Can't teach old dogs new tricks. There's no way to get better. And aging was this one-way road to nothingness, of becoming less of yourself day after day after day. And in that, I started to question that. Now today we have words for it. It's called a growth mindset. But Carol Dweck had not yet written her seminal book by that name. So I was stumbling my way through this, trying to figure out just how far I could push my talents. How far could I take this? Could I get really good? And then I meet this incredible woman. I fall for her in a way that I've never fallen for anybody in my life. She's from London, very successful father who took himself from living in a small village in Cyprus, which I'd never even heard of. I didn't have a passport at the time. Took himself from a small village in Cyprus, began living on his own at the age of 11, and worked his way up to running one of the largest shipping companies in the world. Took himself from abject poverty, the kind of poverty you can't imagine, where you can't afford meat, that your family eats meat once a year, from a goat, by the way, that you raise and slaughter. And took himself to being wealthy and very successful. Flash forward, I'm in love with this woman, and I go to this man, and I ask for his blessing to marry his daughter. And he says no. That was hard to hear. And he asks me one very simple question. Now, at this time, by the way, I don't have a job. I'm living at his ex-wife's house, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. His daughter is the breadwinner. She's going to work every day while I stay at home. And he asks me one question. My daughter has become used to a certain lifestyle. How do you plan to take care of her? And I said to him, sir, I know what you see right now is a broke kid with no job. But I'm telling you, I'm the most ambitious person you've ever met. But the truth was, while I had that dream, I knew what I wanted to become. I wasn't doing anything about it because I didn't understand the difference between ambition and drive. And at this period in my life, I would lay in bed for up to 3 or 4 hours every morning because it was warm under the sheets and it was cold out of them. And I didn't want to walk the 4 steps to grab my clothes, to put them on. I wasn't clever enough to think I'm going to take this sweatshirt and put it right next to the bed so I can warm up before I get out. That's 7 years before I'm a multimillionaire. And there I am, laying in bed, not having any idea how to solve the problem of being so cold I can't get myself out of bed. And I start to feel a deep shame about who I am. Because I have promised this woman that I'm going to make her wealthy one day. And there I am laying in bed, and the only thing that finally gets me out is I know she's going to come home every day for lunch, and at that point I need to get out of bed quickly, make her lunch so that she doesn't see that I've been laying in bed all morning. And that shame starts to intensify so much that I hit a breaking point, and I realize I can't marry her in good conscience, telling her father that I am going to take care of your daughter. I'm going to make her rich. I will take care of her in a way that is going to shock you one day. I can't say that and keep acting the way that I'm acting. And I start thinking about my time as a teacher, and I realize I can get better, but I've got to hold myself to a standard. I've got to work. I've got to figure out this thing called drive. I've got to get up and get going. I've got to become unstoppable. And I'm here to tell you right now, becoming unstoppable is a thing. It is very real and has everything to do with who you want to become, and has nothing to do with who you are today. So I began to think about the person I wanted to become. I stopped worrying about who I was right now, and I began to paint a vision of how the person would act that I want to become. And I began to act in that fashion. Now, growing up, there were two things that I promised myself that would happen. Now, this is as a slightly chubby kid growing up in a morbidly obese family in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Tacoma in the house. And I said, one day I'm going to be rich, and one day I'm going to have six-pack abs. That was the promise. But I didn't know how I was going to achieve either of those things. My wife and I end up moving back from London to LA. I start teaching again. It's going well. It's reinforcing that belief that I can change. I can become what I want to become. I feel myself getting stronger. I'm reading a lot voraciously. I have this mathematical equation that I live by. I equals I-O. Ideas in equal ideas out. Don't worry about whether or not there are new thoughts to think. Worry only about that you have a unique mind based on your time, based on your experience, based on the things that you've read, and you will synthesize those ideas in a unique way. So I start reading voraciously, trying to get anything that I can into my mind. And as I'm doing this, as I'm realizing what it takes to actually grow and become different, two guys walk into my class, and they're wealthy entrepreneurs who also happen to be bodybuilders. So I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Six-pack abs and money. Like, this is nuts. And these guys say, hey, look, we're about to start a company. It's a technology company. Why don't you join us? We need a copywriter. But don't think of yourself as a copywriter. You can have any job in the company that you want. You just have to become the right person for the job. And I'm thinking, these guys are my white rabbit. They've got money. They've got six-pack abs. I can learn a lot from them. So even though everybody thinks I'm crazy, to leave the job teaching, which is a stable job, to go with these guys who are probably BSing me and follow them into this startup. But I do it. And there's a whole bunch of us that they make that same statement to. You can have any job in the company you want. You just have to become the right person for that job. And when it started, we were in this beautiful conference room overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Everyone had floor-to-glass or floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Pacific Ocean, except for me. And I was put in the server room. And if you've ever seen a server room, they are dark, they have whirring sound of all the computers processing everything. And I remember one of the guys asking me, who's the kid in the server room? And that's where I started. I started at the bottom. And one by one, I watched other people fall away. People that didn't want to work the amount of hours. They didn't want to put in the effort to get better. They weren't prepared to become somebody new. They were trying to capitalize on who they were. But by that point, I really believed I could become somebody else. And I remember saying to my wife, we're going to move, and we're going to get an apartment that's no more than 7 minutes from either of the two guys that hired me. They were the two partners in the company. And I said, the reason I want to do that is if they call me at 2 a.m. in the morning, I want to be able to get there in less than 10 minutes. And I want them to know no one is more serious about taking advantage of this opportunity than me. No one in this company is willing to work as hard as me. Not only will I be the only one that shows up, but I'll show up in less than 10 minutes. And so my wife agreed, and we moved, and we actually timed it. Every time we found an apartment that she liked, we would drive first to one, time it back, drive to the other one, time it, to make sure that I could get there in less than 10 minutes. And that began to create momentum for me. And I began to move up in the company. And I began to read and learn and fail and embarrass myself. And I remember when it started, I knew nothing about business. And I remember whenever we would do a conference call, there would be one part of the call where I would get to contribute. This is true. And that part where I got to contribute was saying goodbye. And I used to get so excited. Like, here it's coming. We're wrapping up. This is amazing. Goodbye. And that was my contribution. And that's where I started as an entrepreneur. I did not start as the guy with the lemonade stand. I did not start as somebody buying baseball cards and selling them back. I started out literally as a moron who knew absolutely nothing, but I had the drive to learn. Now, if you guys have been keeping up with brain science, I am here to tell you right now, you can become anyone you want. Now, the process of taking myself from scrounging in my couch cushions to find enough change to put gas in my car to building a billion-dollar business was all about building a set of beliefs. Now, I believe that the Matrix has us all. I don't actually think we live in a simulation, but I think the movie The Matrix is the perfect metaphor for the human experience. We have all pulled a web of lies over our own eyes. And the web of lies is what you tell yourself about what's possible for you and for the world. And once you get that web of lies over your eyes, you simply see it as reality. And you don't understand that each one of those fundamental beliefs is alterable, that you could choose to believe something else. In fact, you don't even realize that they are beliefs. Einstein has a quote. It's one of the most important quotes in my life. The most important question any man must decide for himself is whether or not he lives in a friendly or hostile universe. Now, what I love about that quote, so what's hiding in it, is that it's a decision. You get to choose whether you're living in a friendly or a hostile universe. There's no objective reality. It just is what it is. You're going to get what you see. You're going to get what you focus on. And you see what you focus on. So the more you focus on, the world works against me, I've got bad luck, the more you're going to see proof of that. You're going to seek it out. You're going to act in accordance with that belief. If, on the other hand, you believe the human potential is nearly limitless, that the human animal is, by its very nature, the ultimate adaptation machine. Think about this for a second. Humans are the apex predator, unlike anything else the world has ever seen. We can live in any corner of the globe, from the Arctic to the deserts. At one point, James Cameron was literally at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean. Humans can not only get there, they can thrive. Now, nature had to make a decision with every animal. Do we create something that comes pre-programmed? Think of a horse. When a horse is born, it can already run, jump, walk, eat. A human, on the other hand, takes the opposite approach, where nothing is pre-programmed, but now you can go in any direction. When humans are born, we can't hold our own head up. This is something that really freaks me out. Humans are so incapable of taking care of themselves, you could literally lay an infant next to a bottle and it would still starve to death. We can't hold our own head up. We poo in our diapers. We are literally in need of constant care for years of our lives. Now, this comes with a benefit, which is that we can adapt in any direction that we want. And the most beautiful part of this is it never stops. Even as you get older, you can decide that you want to go in a different direction. You can change the course of where you're headed. And so, in this role that I found myself as budding entrepreneur, I set out to learn everything that I could, to understand what is my goal, and then to work my way backwards. One of the most profound things that ever happened to me, and if you guys haven't read the book Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, do. In that book, he lays out the difference between something that is resilient and something that is truly anti-fragile. I'm going to say somebody that's unstoppable is truly anti-fragile. And what anti-fragile is, the more you attack it, the stronger it gets. So something that is resilient or tough, it is still defined by its breaking point. The more you go after it, eventually it will break. Something that's anti-fragile grows with that. And I believe each and every one of us can build a mindset that is truly anti-fragile. But there is only one thing that I have found that is actually anti-fragile, and it looks like this. I was there with my partners. They routinely made me feel stupid all the time. They were older than me. They were more than 10 years ahead of me on their entrepreneurial journey. And so I was just wrong all the time. Now, up to that point in my life, I actually called myself the king of remedial jobs. Up until then, I'd only gone for jobs where I knew I'd be smarter than the person interviewing me. I knew that at some point during the interview, they were going to ask that magical question which made me feel so good about myself, which was, why are you here? Why are you interviewing for this job? And I lived for that because it made me feel smart. So here I am, now not in that world anymore. I'm with guys who are way ahead of me. They're way smarter than me. And I feel dumb all the time. And one day I find myself arguing for this path in our business because it was my idea. And I knew it was wrong. That was the hilarious thing. I knew it was wrong, and yet I was arguing for it, like really passionately. And then all of a sudden, it actually worked. And they agreed to do it. And I thought, oh shit, now what? I've been telling my wife that I'm going to make her rich, and here I am arguing for something that just makes me feel good about myself. And I had this moment of crisis. And I asked myself, no judgment, what do you really want? Because if what you really want is to feel good about yourself, to feel smart, to be right, to be worthy, if those are the things that you want, then get out of this company. Because you're wrong often. You're making mistakes all the time. And your partners are so far ahead of you that they make you feel stupid. So this is like, that doesn't make any sense. So if you want to just go feel good, go back to being the king of remedial jobs, be in places where you're always feeling smart, where you're usually right, and live that life. But if, on the other hand, what you really want is to actually reach your goals, then you're going to have to stop worrying about feeling good about yourself. And both of those felt flawed. Everybody needs to feel good about themselves. That's just the reality of being a human. You've got to find a way to feel good about yourself. But I really believe everything you do in life should be in service of your goals. And the moment that you're acting out of alignment with your goals, you either have a problem with your goal or with your behavior. One of them is going to have to change. And so I realized in that moment that I needed to change what I was building my self-esteem around, because I was building it around being right, and I was wrong so much. I was building it around being smart, and I just wasn't that smart. I was building it around being good and worthy. And the fact is, those were just judgments on myself. And so I decided right then and there, it's the one thing in my life that borders on truly being an epiphany. And I realized I need to change what I build my self-esteem around, and it needs to be something that, I didn't have the word anti-fragile at the time, but something that the more somebody goes after it, the better off I'm going to be. The more it's going to push me towards my goals. And that thing is, and if somebody has a better answer, I will take it, but the only way to build your ego that is truly anti-fragile that I have found is to be the learner. To be willing to admit when you're wrong. To look at your goal and work backwards and say, is what I'm doing actually moving me towards my goal or not? Not does it make me feel good about myself? Not am I right? Not am I smart? Is it moving me towards my goal? And if it is, then you do it. And if it doesn't, then you don't. And my life became that cut and dry. And you can literally draw a line in the sand, a demarcation point of my life before that and my life after that. And after that, I suddenly found myself just wanting more knowledge. I wanted to know what I was doing wrong. I wanted to know where I was making mistakes. Because, and this is so important, because at that moment I realized skills have utility. Once you understand, the whole reason to acquire a skill is that it gives you power. Now I'm going to define power. Power to me is the ability to close your eyes and imagine a world, the world the way you wish it was, and then open your eyes and make that world come true. That's power. And the thing that stands between you, where you are today, and your goals, where you want to get, is a gap in skill set. It is a gap in abilities. And once you're willing to look nakedly at your inadequacies, to literally build your self-esteem, your entire sense of self-worth and value is built around one thing. Whenever you face an obstacle, whenever you face a difficulty, whenever you fail, you have one thing that you say to yourself. On a long enough timeline, I can learn this. When you switch your life around to that, whatever your goal is here, whatever part of the honors club or the leading edge you're at, or if you want to go beyond that, whatever that is, wherever you want to go, plant that flag, identify the skills that you would need to get there, and then set about every day getting those skills. Here's the problem I find most people have. They judge themselves through the lens of a moment. They fail at something. They miss the honor club. They don't close that deal they thought they were going to. They embarrass themselves. They flub something. And they think that defines who they are. But I'm telling you right now, you're not defined by who you are. You're defined by who you want to become and the price you're willing to pay to get there. So flash forward, I start putting all this to use in my life. I am focused only on what I can learn. I'm no longer being held back by my ego. We work and work and work. We take that technology company up. It becomes the 42nd fastest growing company in North America. On paper, I'm a multimillionaire. I had earned sweat equity in the company. By working so hard, I didn't ask for a raise for 5 years. I just went after it. I worked every day. 7 days a week, to the point where at 6.5 years, my wife had to pull me aside and say, this is now damaging our marriage. I was so into it. I was so committed to getting where I wanted to go that I was really learning. And I was getting more powerful. I had the ability to imagine something and then make it come true with my abilities. And in that process, I began to realize, whoa, like you can really become what you want to become. And I had, on paper, become a multimillionaire. I was making more money than I'd ever made before in my life. And I went in and I quit. And I quit because I was so profoundly unhappy. Because I realized somewhere in this race of becoming the best version of myself, somewhere in this race of trying to get wealthy, I'd completely lost touch with what made me love life. And I was living the cliche of money can't buy happiness. I mean, it was literally ridiculous. And so I go into my partners and I say, look, here's your equity back. I just can't do this anymore. I've got to live a life that makes me feel alive. I want to have fun. Like, this is just crazy. And they said, we could do this without you, but we don't want to. And so that let me connect with something other than the money for the first time in 6.5 years. And so at that point, I'd already quit. So I thought, I don't have anything left to lose. And so I confessed. I said, look, my highest priority in business is brotherhood. It's camaraderie. It's the people I'm with. And what I had learned at that point is the struggle's guaranteed, the success is not. If you're really striving for something, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really, really hard. And it's going to force you to adapt and grow and become a better version of yourself. And that can be the single most beautiful process of your life if it's aimed at something you care about. And so I said, well, the only way that I'll come back is if we sell this company, we create something that's predicated on value, we focus on building a community, we focus on connecting with our customers, with really doing something amazing that we'll be proud of, that we'll have passion for. There's a great quote often attributed to Mother Teresa. Nobody will act for the many, but people will act for the one. And so I started thinking about my mom and my sister, morbidly obese. I knew I was going to lose them too early if somebody didn't solve that problem. And so for 3 very different reasons, we decided to sell the technology company and start a nutrition company. And when we started that company, everybody told us we were crazy. There were 1,600 protein bars already on the market when we started Quest. The category had been declining for years. One potential distributor actually said, I need another protein bar like I need another hole in the head. That sound familiar with your guys' circumstances? It's not a great time in your business. Not a lot of inventory. In that same setup, by focusing on what we loved doing, what made us feel good, on what would be beneficial to the customer, providing exceptional customer support, evangelizing our customer at every turn, doing only that which was going to actually help my mom and my sister, which was not always the most profitable, by the way. In fact, it usually wasn't. But it made us feel good about who we were. And so we didn't know if we were going to build a big business, but we knew that we were going to believe in it. We knew that we were going to be passionate about it. We knew that we were going to touch people's lives. And that became the rallying cry for the business. Actually deliver value. Do things that other people just can't imagine. And that's how we went from not existing to being valued at over $1 billion in less than 5 years. Just as we were coming out of the Great Recession, into an industry that was oversaturated and declining. Because let me tell you something right now and burn this into the core of your soul. There's always room for the best. There's always room for the best. And if you're prepared to become the best, you can become unstoppable. You can build something other people think is impossible. You can build something out from under a mountain of doubt. And that brings us back to my father-in-law. The man who had asked me how I was going to take care of his daughter. He's always been very kind to me. It's important to note that. Always very kind to me. And he came out to LA. And by this point, we're doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We've got 1,400 employees, millions of dollars of equipment, hundreds of thousands of square feet of space. And I'm walking him around the production floor. Bars are coming off the line at the rate of 1.5 million a day. And I said, Andreas, do you remember when you asked me how I would take care of your daughter? And he said, yes. I said, how am I doing? And he just started to cry. That to me is everyone's story. Everyone can choose that journey. Now, I don't make a moral distinction. I don't think that it's the right way to live your life. It just happened to be the way that was true for me. I believe the very meaning of life is to find out how many skills you can acquire that have utility and then put that utility to the test in service of someone else. It's what the ancient Greeks called techne. I've worked my ass off for this set of skills. They are unique to me, and they help other people. And in being able to help other people was something that I worked very hard for. I feel good about myself. And I will make you guys one promise right here today. The game you're playing, please listen to this, so that you don't end up wasting years of your life like I did mine. The game that you're playing is not success. The game that you're playing is not money. The game that you're playing is brain chemistry. It's about fulfillment. The only thing ultimately that's ever going to matter in your life is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. The things you say to yourself quietly in your mind when no one else is around, that's what matters. And becoming somebody that you're proud of, in whatever way you define that, is completely open to you. Humans are the ultimate adaptation machine. We can grow in any direction. It is what we are designed to do. What scientists used to call junk DNA. And they were so confused because humans only have 20,000 genes. Some onions have 40,000 genes. And they thought this can't be. Onions just aren't more biologically complicated than humans. So what's going on? And then they realized all that junk DNA that they were dismissing, that's epigenetic information. Meaning, this one animal, this human animal, is designed to respond. We don't come pre-programmed. We come ready to adapt. We come ready to change. We come ready to grow. And once you know that that is the nature of being a human, that that is the beautiful gift of this life is to see how much you can grow in whatever direction you want, towards whatever end you want. But the gift that you have been given is the ability to change. So if you don't like who you are today, that's okay. It doesn't matter who you are today. It only matters who you want to become and the price you're willing to pay to get there. Thank you.